Alright, hello everybody, it's The Last Hodler, and as you probably know from one of my previous videos, I am one of the lead blockchain developers for the UK's leading blockchain company called Online Blockchain. And I just wanted to start a series on how you, as a developer, can make your very first cryptocurrency-driven web application. Okay, so this is going to be the first video of that series, and in this video I'm going to show you how to set up the web server that we'll be using, either locally or on a server in the cloud that you might be renting somewhere, and we're going to be using the LAMP stack for that. So we're going to be using Linux, okay, as the operating system, Apache to run the web server, MySQL for the database, and PHP for the code that we're going to write, which is going to drive this whole thing. Okay, so the first thing I need you to do is open VirtualBox and put Ubuntu 16.04 onto VirtualBox. Okay, and I'll leave a link to both VirtualBox and that operating system in the description. And there are a million tutorials on the internet on how to set that up. It takes a couple of minutes. But once you're up with VirtualBox, then we're ready to begin. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to install Apache, which is going to be our web server software. Okay. So the first thing we need to do is we need to press Control, Alt, and T, and that's going to open a terminal. Alright, and in the terminal we're going to be running all the commands to set up this web server, okay? We're going to be installing Apache through the terminal, phpMySQL, all that stuff, okay? So first things first though, we're going to first install Apache, alright? So the command for that is sudo, okay, so we're going to be running this as root, so we need to root permissions, so we need to type sudo first. So it's sudo apt-get, okay, install Apache 2. And type in your password and click yes. It's 6,000 kilobytes, that's okay. Alright, I'm just going to put this over here as well, make it a little bit bigger so that you can see what's going on. Alright, so that is installing Apache onto our machine. Once that has completed its installation, our VirtualBox, our machine, is automatically going to be a web server from now on, and we'll be able to access it from localhost. So now that it's completed its installation, I'm going to just demonstrate that before we start changing any code or anything like that. Okay. So I'm just going to open a web browser. I'm going to open Firefox. Alright, once Firefox is open, I'm just going to type 127.0.0.1, and that's going to make the browser go to our local address and check what is happening on port 80, which is the TCP port. It's the internet port, the web port. Okay, so 127.0.0.1. Okay, and as you can see, Apache 2 Ubuntu default page. All right, so that means that Apache has successfully installed onto your machine, and it has converted a certain part of your file system to be the kind of the web root, and then we're going to build our website from the web root, and people will be able to access that via the internet. Okay, so that's what Apache does. It kind of sets up those conditions such that your machine is now a web server. Alright, so that's that one done. Let's move on to the next one, which is going to be installing MySQL. Now, what MySQL is it's a very high-performance database framework, I guess you could say. It's going to be running all of the kind of back-end data and information that we need to save in a neat and tidy kind of database, okay, that we can use and access information, change information, put entries in, we can take entries out, things like that. So that's the next one that we need to install, that's MySQL. So the command for that is sudo apt-get install mysql-server mysql client. I really hope I spelled that right. And yes, it's 160 megabytes, and that's okay. So once this installs, it's going to come up with a window, and then we'll have to configure our MySQL database kind of like initial parameters. So we'll have to set up a user, which is like the root user of the MySQL database. Okay, here we are. So it's saying, okay, you need to put in a password. It's recommended, but it's not mandatory. I would definitely recommend, just as good practice, to use a password. So my password's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we'll repeat it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Alright, back to installing. So now that that's installed, we can actually use a command to check the status of our MySQL database, see what's happening with it, see if it has installed properly. So the command that we're going to type in to check the status of the MySQL database is going to be sudo, because we need to run it with root permissions. Okay, so sudo system ctl status mysql. Alright, there we go. And as you can see here, it says active, running, and this is the current time. So we have MySQL running. Okay, so the next thing we need to do to continue on our building of our web server, okay, the next thing we need to do for that is we need to install PHP, which is going to be the programming language that we use to write all of the functionality, to write the methods that are going to be sending coins to our clients, or maybe receiving coins, or displaying balances, everything that's going to be directly talking to the blockchain. We're going to be writing all that functionality in PHP. So let's continue and install PHP. So the first one we need to write is sudo apt-get install. Okay, and this is a really long one, so if I type it wrong, I'm very sorry. So PHP 7.0-mysql, PHP 7.0-curl, PHP 7.0-JSON, PHP 7.0-CGI, PHP 7.0 lib, oops, alright, lib, Apache 2, mod, PHP, mod, PHP 7.0. Okay, so this is our command, hopefully. I'll put this command into the description, and then you'll be able to copy paste it, and you don't have to worry about typing that whole thing out. So I might have spelled a few of these incorrectly, so here's hoping that's all correct. Okay, so just before moving forward, I'd just like to talk about that last command that we ran. I think it might be a good idea for me to just explain everything that we have installed in that last command. Okay, so the first thing is all of the kind of dependencies that are going to be running the MySQL database, so that one's pretty self-explanatory. Okay, PHP curl is a way that we can send requests to maybe like other web servers and APIs so that we can get information back from them. So that's curl. And then the next one is JSON. Now what JSON is it's a way of encoding information in a standardized form that you can easily parse data from. Okay, so if I'm going to send you a bunch of information about the weather, I'm probably going to send it in JSON format, and that way it would be very easy for you as a developer to parse the information that you're looking for from that JSON, extracting pieces that you need and omitting things that you maybe don't need. Okay. So the next thing is CGI, which stands for Common Gateway Interface, and it's just a way that we're standardizing the way that applications and different hardwares and softwares interact with our web server. Okay, and then some other standard stuff just to run the language of PHP 7. That would be the next one. Okay, and then some stuff to run Apache, which is like it's going to be like a middleware between Apache and PHP. These are going to be all the libraries which are going to allow them to talk to each other. Okay, so that is the command that we just ran there. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do after installing PHP is to, I suppose, test it. Let's create our first PHP file and verify that everything has been installed correctly. Okay, so we're going to be we're going to be creating a new file in like our web directory, in our web root, you might call it. Okay, so our web root is going to be /var/www/html. Okay, so let's that's like the default web root in an Apache server setup. Okay, so that's important to remember. So let's change directory into there. So it's cd for change directory. Okay, and then we're going to go /var/www/html. Okay, and then we're going to have a look inside this folder. Okay, this is like our web root. So what's going to be in here? Let's type ls, and we can see that we've got a file here called index.html. Okay, well that's actually this web page that we opened moments ago. Okay, 127.0.0.1. That's our web address, our local address. It's not our web address, it's our local address as far as this computer is concerned. So we're loading this HTML file, index.html, through the web root, which is kind of what this IP, I suppose you could call it, points to, right? It's pointing to this. It's being served this web root, the contents of this web root, right? So now let's create a new file. Okay, let's call this file. Okay, so we'll say touch. That's to create a new file, and we'll call it test.php. Okay, we're just going to call it test.php. All right. Okay, so we're going to have to run this as root because the permissions are really strict by default. Okay, so we're going to say sudo. Actually, we won't make it. We'll just we'll go straight into an editor. So we'll say sudo nano test.php, and what this is going to do is it's going to open a text editor, and then when we write what we need in here, we're going to save it, and then that file will be created for us. So this is going to be test.php, and we're going to write our first PHP program. So the first thing you do when you start a PHP program is you write this tag. It's less than symbol, question mark PHP, and then the closing tag is just question mark greater than symbol. And everything inside here is the PHP that we're going to be writing for our application to deal with all the cryptocurrency stuff that we're going to implement later. Okay, so but for now, we're just going to type in php info. Okay, and what that's going to do is that's going to print to our browser all of the information about our web server that we might want to know. So like the the debugging level, or just anything about our web server that's sort of configurable. Okay, so now that we've written our PHP code into this file, we need to type Control and 0 to kind of like save it. It's called write out, but it's just saving it. Okay, so Control 0 and then click enter. So that's saved it now, and then Control X, which is exit. So now that we've written our code and we've saved our code, we can actually see if this page has worked. So let's go back to our web browser. We'll go to 127.0.0.1. That's our local address, okay, as far as this computer is concerned. And then we will type / on the end of it, test.php. Okay, and what we've got here is the result of that function that we typed into our test.php file. It's like the information, of our PHP. It's PHP info, all right? So we've got a whole bunch of information here, and we can kind of check out the sort of default configuration of our web server. Okay, so now we've got our web server running. We know all the stuff that we want to know about it in test.php. So now let's install the final thing that we want to install before we can start developing on our web server. Okay, it's a handy program called phpMyAdmin. Okay, and what phpMyAdmin is kind of like a layer on top of MySQL, so that you can very easily interact with MySQL. You can add databases, you can take away tables, you can add values without having to type everything in manually through the command line interface. It's like a graphical user interface. Everything you'll need to interact with MySQL is going to be in there. So that's going to be really important for our development. So that's going to be the next thing we install. So to install that, you type in sudo apt-get install phpMyAdmin. And yes, 53 megabytes is fine. So once this is ready, it's going to pop up with the configuration interface, and then we will be able to attach it to like the instance of Apache that we're running on our server, because this web server, it might have like Apache, and then it might have Node.js, it might have a bunch of other weird and wonderful things. So MySQL needs to figure out like which web software am I trying to attach myself to right now. So this is going to be Apache 2. Alright, and now this message is saying that we need to have a database already installed on the Ubuntu server, which we already have. So we'll click yes. And then now it's asking for a password. So I will give it the same password as I gave it for my MySQL database, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Do it again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And now there's just one final sort of command that you have to type into your terminal, and that is sudo nano /etc/apache2/apache2.conf, and we're just going to check whether a very important value has actually entered our Apache config. So I'm going to put the password in to open that in Nano, and once you've done that, just scroll down to the very bottom of this file. Okay, and then just make sure this bottom line is attached to the end of this text file. If it's not at the end of this file, simply write it in, type Control O and Control X, that will save and exit. And so now you're ready to take a look at phpMyAdmin. So just simply go to 127.0.0.1/phpMyAdmin, and you should get this login window. And to log in, you just simply type root as the username and that password that you used to set up phpMyAdmin before. Press go, and then you are in the graphical user interface that you can use to set up your MySQL database. So that has been how to set up the LAMP stack. for our web server that we will use in the next episode to write our cryptocurrency blockchain web application. Okay, and thanks for watching, and remember to, as always, hodl for as long as possible.